Hey,
Yeah.
Patrick, Anthony, I appreciate you jumping on. I got to thinking, and I think it's timely just because you guys are at HP Tech Jam and kind of learning about new technologies and things like that. But I got to thinking about what should we be doing better for our clients to help safeguard their data. I've asked Gail to join us, maybe take some notes, and she is recording this. Maybe we'd want to share it with customers. I don't know, but I think it's a good chance for us to kind of catch up, see what we're doing right, and see what we can be doing better for our customers. And I know you guys um, know that I consider Commvault the safety net of all things data, right? So I mean that is that last line of defense. I think we're doing a pretty good job of helping those people that engage us, but I want to be able to sleep better at night. I want to know that we're doing everything we can and maybe even reaching out to some of those customers that haven't engaged us yet to do that hardening. So
Yeah.
what can we do to evangelize this better? What are some of the advantages? And I know, Patrick, you talked about some different tiers of protection. Maybe we could review that just to see.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that, we've really been focusing on is that recovery in depth kind of mindset, and talking about how we have multiple copies of our data, even from a backup perspective, and they can do different things, right? We can have a performant copy that we can do mass restores from, that's close to the primary storage. We can also leverage Commvault and snapshots as well. But and we have everything from a mutable copy that's maybe offsite somewhere, or you've got an air gap copy, whether that's tape or to the cloud. All of these different copies ensure that we can recover, but they have different performance profiles based on the need too, right? So having that recovery in depth and having multiple copies of our data that perform at different functionalities, I think is key. When we're talking about making sure that our recoverability is covered in any in any data loss scenario.
And I would agree with that 100%. But isn't it true? And I think where I'm losing a little bit of sleep at night is Commvault is a great product, great out of the box. We've been a partner for 20 years. We all know this, but what it we do need to take some steps to safeguard that, right? And we call it a Commvault hardening engagement. How do we get that word out? Because I agree. I mean, the different performance levels of our targets, that's appropriate. The immutability, the remote copies, those type of things. But that takes some setup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've had this Commvault hardening engagement for quite some time. But it's not just been like, oh, this is what we've done, because this is what Commvault describes as a best practice from a security standpoint. We've actually taken that farther and evolved that engagement to the point where, even if you have engaged with us previously on that Commvault hardening, there are things that maybe we didn't have as part of that hardening before, or if you haven't had that hardening engagement, you'll learn or you'll benefit from the long line of evolution that this service has taken over the years.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this. I mean, this is the word soup of the day type of thing with multi-factor authentication and stuff like that. Get me up to speed. What all does Commvault offer these times? And maybe we need to relook at. I have the Commvault hardening engagement document up. Maybe we need to relook at how we market that and make sure that we're using all those buzzwords that Commvault has switched to, right? So do they still call it MFA, for example? I call it the nuclear option. I think it's called something else. Can you run through those real quick?
Yeah. So I think you're referring to that. We have multi-factor authentication, right? We have the ability as part of that application's authentication process. But to your point, we also have those multi-person approvals or business logic workflows that we use to make sure that any delete operation has an appropriate approval and it doesn't happen in a bubble somewhere. There's eyes on that deletion and making sure that it's appropriate. And that doesn't mean just, from a particular job or storage policy or client. We can actually make it so that they can't change retentions at all. Definitely not lower retentions. We can put something like compliance lock on. That's something that's, come along as we've evolved that service.
Sure.
So yeah, that nuclear option, those turn two keys, the multi-person approval for deletions is something that didn't exist at the beginning of our engagements, but exists now and is the standard for new installations for hardened engagements. We got to get that turned on for people because it's the one, that's going to keep us from having a single compromised account from wiping our whole backup strategy out.
Yeah.
Well, so on that note, I mean, one thing I want to call out is it's not just a two-person nuclear. I mean, typically when people think the nuclear option, it's like two keys, but we can make that a third, a fourth, a fifth key based on the severity of paranoia. So, I mean, we're always talking about the bad actor getting in, compromised credentials, but there's also the chance of rogue employees or just fat finger, not understanding what you're doing and accidentally doing something. And this prevents against that, where we can have multiple people have to approve these processes, not just somebody else, which makes it more difficult to thwart. In addition to that, the alerting that comes with it is also key, because everybody in that group gets notified that something happened versus,
Right.
just waiting for somebody else. Again, kind of that isolation scenario is avoided.
That's a good tidbit, Anthony, because I never really think about that. I always think of the two key option, to your point, but not only can we add multiple keys, it sounds like we can also add, that notification so that, everybody is aware that something's going on, even if it's not them that's part of the approval process. So that's cool stuff. And I don't think we market that to that point. So
Yeah.
Galen, correct me if I'm wrong, Gail, but I think we're about half of our customer base has taken advantage of this so far. So we really need to reach out to that other half. Does that sound about the right percentage?
Yep, that's just about right. We're just
Okay.
over half.
Okay. So we can look at that. Anthony, anything else that you come across while you've been at HP Tech Jam?
I do. I mean, if I'm switching at the story, I guess a little bit, I would say, so many people are focused on backups and getting that offsite air gap with backups. And what we've noticed with customers is a lot of times it's a security checkbox for, ransomware insurance. They have to get that air gap copy. What that means is all interpreted differently. Are we talking air gap from something actually being offline physically? Are we talking air gap from authentication domains, or both? One thing that's interesting is, the recoverability of that, that's a break glass scenario. In my opinion, it's an insurance policy on an insurance policy that you hope you never have to take advantage of.
Right.
But if you ever do, you want to make sure that you actually can recover from it. And we could do that in the backup space with a cloud copy or tape or some of these other technologies, but we can also architect things a little bit differently with your tier one storage, where, cloud copies aren't cheap over time, right? And what if we could put an isolated vault environment in where you have a tier one storage copy that we can recover back in a break glass scenario? So
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, is that different than the Commvault clean room then?
Yeah, so we're talking about doing this with primary storage.
Gotcha.
And so taking and creating a vault environment, you could think of it as a separate rack, but we have separate switch that's the ports all controlled from inside the vault environment. And we're turning that on and off based on certain criteria so that it can catch tier one snapshot copies. So becomes another way to recover. Again, we're solving for different things, and that's why the design, the recovery, all these things in depth, because there's no silver bullet anymore. We're not just solving a DR scenario of a data center outage. We're solving instant response as well as DR, and it's hard to project from a war games perspective what situation you're going to be faced. And so having multiple different things in your back pocket allows you to still be a hero.
Yeah. Well, it used to be. Go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I was going to say, primary storage plays a very important role from a recovery perspective. It should be your first look at, right? I mean, Commvault's already, we know that that's the piece that we can rely on, but your primary storage has fail safes in place now as well. Things like multi-factor protected snapshotting, so you can't delete those snapshots, or safe mode snapshots. all these things we see on primary storage that make it more recoverable and more reliable from a recoverability standpoint.
And
Yeah,
to that point, I mean, HPE storage actually has a virtual lock where not even support has a backdoor to delete data out of that. And so again, I mean, it's interesting where we're going. The word I kept hearing, you know, we've talked over the years about how immutability, what does that mean to you? Because immutability really means unchangeable. And one thing I heard this week was indestructible copy. And that really changes the mindset of what you're actually looking for. So how do we make something indestructible?
Yeah, well, you're both kind of going down the same path I was thinking too. It used to be backups were backups and storage was storage and DR was DR. Business continuity was different, and they're so blended today, where your primary storage is your first line of defense for a backup, and potentially for that disaster recovery and business continuity play as well. So, yeah, the design in depth is really, really important today because the products do work well together, and the technology has changed so much they really do need to interact to get the best benefits. So I have this document up for the hardening. I'll work with Gail and maybe run it by you guys, and we'll get this out to our customers and try to reach the other half of our customer base to engage that. The other quick thing I wanted to talk about was we have this document. We created this as just talking points, as almost like a public service, so to speak. And it really is, hey, do this tabletop exercise with your staff, you know, get this out to the customers and our clients and say, hey, these are some of the talking points that we've thought of. We should spend some time, probably not on this call, but go through this again. I would really like customers to call us if there's a question. You know, we definitely want to help secure the environment before an attack. That really helps me sleep better at night. But I also want them to call us because, to your point, time is of the essence on the first couple of things I think we have on here, if I remember right. You know, stop the attack, that timing is everything on that one. Preserve the data. We have to act quickly on that one. I really want them to call us to help do those first two. You know, I think we could be a big help to our customers. And then if they want to engage in somebody else for the forensics, that's fine. But let's make sure that they get their data secured. Anything else we need to be thinking about there?
Well, to your point though, we for most of our customers, we've had this design in depth discussion with them, and we know their technology. We've contributed throughout the stack in their data centers. We definitely know the recoverability routes, the copies, the way that we secure those copies and how we move forward and protect our ability to move forward. So I think that's great, and that's why calling us minute one, even if it is just to say, hey, I just need some oversight on this, or hey, just so you know, I may be calling in to support for some additional assistance. We appreciate that, and it's something that improves our ability to execute successfully from a recoverability standpoint.
I think also where they're advocate as well. An IR company is not a fly by night, but they're coming in to do a job and they're moving on to the next. We want that. We have that relationship. We want that long-term relationship. We want it to be successful, and the company obviously to be successful in recovering. So there's just a little bit different maybe of ownership and mindset of us trying to be the advocate to make sure that things get done correctly.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's why I don't sleep well at night. We have these customers and they're 10-year plus relationships with Eagles. So we do know their environment, but more importantly, they're, kind of part of the Eagle family, so to speak. So
exactly.
I'll run this document by everybody as well. And maybe we'll include that as part of the hardening deliverable, Gail, and we can send them both at the same time. It might be another way to get folks to take a look at it. So Gail, we just created a whole bunch of work for you. It was great.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So
Hey, one thing
I have
I
some
was
more
thinking,
thoughts too, whenever,
okay.
but
No, I like it. But one thing I was thinking about too is, where do some of our other services like penetration testing, for example, fall in this messaging to our end users when we're looking at all these folks who are facing, these threats out there.
So that's a great point. That was actually leads into something I was going to mention. So one thing with penetration testing, especially internal penetration testing, the goal is to see if alerting is happening in an organization, because identifying a breach, a rogue, access early minimizes greatly the effect and the impact and what the recovery looks like. So making sure that tools are working, that you actually are seeing some type of bad actors activity early on. Whatever those tools are, we have ones that we prefer, like ThreatWise, where we have, I think of it as a very early and silent warning detection system. Or the other thing is, just understanding what users have access to from a data perspective, and what data is at risk of being breached and exfiltrated is key. And then another thing is, I just got done with a lab on ZTNA, and that zero trust access, where users can access an application that you present to them, but you have control over it. And as soon as you disable control, instantly their access goes away.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's no refresh, anything else. They could be SSH'd into a server, and as soon as you click that session is completely dropped and they have no access. And you think about having these accounts out there, and especially in bigger environments, people leave, people change departments, roles, whatever it is, but their access doesn't get cleaned up.
Right.
And just a normal domain user, I know Adam Savoda talked about this on our last webinar, about if he can gain just a domain admin's user, he can wreak havoc in an environment. And it's amazing what they see, what they have access to, and how he can escalate that to domain admin credentials pretty quick. And so I think they just think, oh, I just got to guard my domain admin accounts. The users don't really matter, but controlling that access, knowing what they have access to, I think is huge.
Yeah, I mean, he says all the time, it's really about the cleanup, right? People just over time forget that there was an admin account created, even, or what access a user has. It shouldn't have that anymore. So, that conversation prompted something else for me, is just to take a bite out of the elephant, as they say, as opposed to trying to consume it all. But we do have different layers. We have primary storage and snapshots. We do have Commvault. We do have ThreatWise. We have EDR. We do have pen testing. Maybe a document, Gail, that helps kind of relate all of those layers of the onion, so to speak, together for the design in depth. Maybe that's a document that we should put together as well. I think that would resonate pretty well with everybody.
Yeah.
Have to see it visually first, but yeah.
I mean, and in addition to that, with Zerto, we have encryption detection at a block layer, in that continuous journal. So they're seeing at a block level if a sub block is basically being encrypted of a file and somehow being corrupted, and you can easily create a blast radius and know when to recover back. I mean, there's so many tools based on what a company wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you guys are at Tech Jam and trying to get all learned up, and so to speak. So I appreciate
this
taking
works.
some time.
I'm working on my tan, so this is way better than being. Yeah,
you're working hard, right, Anthony? You're not just eating ice cream, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for taking the time. Yeah, thanks for taking the time, Gail. I'll let you kind of digest some of the notes and then call us back together maybe when these guys get back in town.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right, thank you.
Thank you.